Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm super excited to be diving into yet another new launch. This time we have the new palette from Natasha Denona. So this is the Retro Glam palette. It is a midi palette, which tends to be my personal favorite, and I do tend to really love her formula. So I'm interested to try this out because the color story is really unique to my collection. So we're gonna do close-ups, swatches, also a tutorial, and I'm gonna tell you my initial first impression of this palette, whether I think it's something that you'd enjoy or something that I don't think is worth the price tag. So of course I will link the palette down below. All the other makeup that I end up wearing will also be down below as well. If you're new here, I hope you stick around and subscribe. I do a ton of makeup content, and if you enjoy first impressions on brand new products, give this video a thumbs up, and let's go ahead and get into trying out the new palette from Natasha. Okay, so a little bit about this product. It is the newest palette from Natasha Denona. It is the Retro Glam palette. This retails for $69. So this palette is available now at a bunch of different retailers, so I'm gonna link quite a few down below. I purchased one from Sephora. It launched yesterday as an app exclusive, and I was able to get 20% off because it was the last day of the sale. I paid expedited shipping. It's supposed to come late tonight, but I got a notification that I actually was receiving a PR package from Natasha. So this is PR. My purchase is supposed to show up in a few hours. So whichever came first, I was gonna be filming with. I usually do get PR from Natasha, but in the past, I would say like 6 months, the PR has been weeks behind the launch. So I just choose to purchase it and then I donate the PR when it does arrive. Bringing two of Natasha's most celebrated creations into a new midi-sized palette concept. This dynamic color story combines the greens, pinks, and neutral nudes of the mini retro eyeshadow palette with a variety of seductive glam eyeshadow palette finishes in a collection of all new shades. Now this palette is made in Italy. It has a 24-month shelf life. It says 19.25 grams or 0.67 ounces. So I want to compare to, let's say, her Glam palette. Now this one says net weight 19.25, 0.67, so that's exactly the same. Let me grab the Retro palette. It's the same on the Retro as well. So it looks like you're getting the same amount of product as the Glam and the Retro. Now I was a little confused because I thought this was a mix of the Glam palette and the Retro palette, the midi sizes, which I have both. And then reading the PR sheet, it says that it's a combination of the mini Retro and the Glam palette. It does also mention that you can pair this palette with other palettes in the Retro and Glam families. I mean, you can use any palette with, you know, any palette that you want to, alone, combine them, whatever. But when I think about the color stories, the Glam and Retro are very different than what the Glam Retro is. So I want to compare them quickly. Okay, so you can see that the Glam palette is on the bottom, the Retro Glam is on the top. Obviously, they're extremely different. And then here we have the comparison of the Retro palette and the Retro Glam. There's maybe, you know, 3 shades in there that kind of go together, but really the Retro palette is just like a romantic color story overall. So before we get into an eye look, I do want to swatch the shades in here. Okay, so I went ahead and swatched the palette, and I have to say this might swatch better than any Natasha palette that I've swatched in a long time. I mean, every single shade was just smooth as butter, pigmented, and even these like lighter shades, I was thinking that they were gonna be like chalky or I'd have to build them up, but they really just swatch beautifully. Of course, we really don't know until we get it on the eyes. So now that I have all the information I think that I wanted to go over, let's go ahead and zoom in and start on an eye look. So as my eyeshadow base, I just have concealer, and then I did set under my brow, but I didn't set my lid. Because this is a lighter palette, more of a pastel sort of vibe, I want to give them the best shot at really gripping on. So I'm going to start off with the shade Evergreen. This one is the deepest matte in the palette, and this is a matte cream formula, which, okay, hold on, I have creasing. Oh my gosh, I crease like so quickly under and on my lid. So I'm going to sort of press this in, just sort of stamp to get a general shape. I am really curious if I'm going to like the looks or look. I don't know if I want to do 2 looks or 1. that I come up with, just because the color story really, when I first saw this, I mean, it was leaked a while ago. I was like, you know, that color story is not something I would wear often, but the more I saw of it, I really was curious. Okay, so next, to blend out the edges, I'm gonna use the matte shade called Sage. This is a little bit lighter, and I'm just gonna go over the edges. So I'm pretty much going on the outline of where I put that first shade. And to blend even more, I'm gonna use the shade Fringe. This is a really, really light, sort of like a mint color, and I'm almost like going up to my brow here. So the mattes are quite powdery, but blending beautifully. I really love Natasha shadows. I just feel like they're very easy to work with. So I'm just going around, bringing in a little bit of that mint color, but also just softening. And to reinforce that shade, I am gonna go back into that evergreen shade. I actually really like that she made this one a creamy matte. It's still not, you know, really dark by any means, but I do think it offers just enough depth. And then before I go in with a shimmer, I'm just gonna take my concealer brush that I had laid my base down with, and I'm just lightly, almost like blending around, again, just to soften. So for the lid, I'm really drawn to this shade called Marlin. So I'm gonna use my finger and just use this dry to start. That is beautiful. So I'm gonna bring this up pretty high just because I brought everything up high in terms of the mattes. Next, I'm gonna take a little bit of this deeper metallic green called Oz. I'm gonna try it on the brush that I applied that first shade with. And I just wanna use this right in the middle to mesh with that matte and that lighter shimmer. So I want to try to brighten this up a little bit. I'm going to go in with this shade called Palladian. This one feels a little dry. It's one of those almost like iridescent shades, like sort of a shift. So I just wet my brush a little bit with some setting spray. Okay, so I'm gonna leave the first eye there for now. I don't really know where I wanna go from here until I figure out what I wanna do on the other side. So I am gonna do two looks. I know it's not gonna look cohesive, but I do want to show you what you can do with this palette. So on this side, I think I'm gonna start off with this pink shade called Belle. And I'm just going to pack this on. I'm gonna try to stay with a similar shape. This shade actually has really nice depth to it. Okay, and I'm gonna jump in next to the shade Faye. This is definitely a really interesting cool tone gray brown. I don't even know how to describe this shade. I'm just going to blend this into that pink. Okay, so I'm gonna take the shade here called Lucy. I'm not sure if this is gonna work. It looks like a lighter version of the one I just applied. I just want to soften around the edges. I'm not sure that's gonna do what I want it to do. So I'm just going back in with that original brush. I didn't add any product. So I'm just gonna go back in with that original shade. And then I'm going back in with that Belle, that pink, because I'm not loving how this is looking. This is kind of my fear, or this was my fear when trying to like mix different shades. Okay, so for the outer corner, I'm gonna go into the shade Flare and I'm gonna see how this blends in. So I have quite a bit of fallout, but I'm not worried about it because I'm using this dry with a fluffy brush. And then on the inner portion of the lid, I'm gonna try this shade up here called Oscar. It's like a sort of taupey shade. And then right in the middle, I am gonna go back in with that Martin shade. just to tie in a little bit of the green. Okay, I'm not loving how this is looking, so I'm going to try to adjust it. I'm going in with Evergreen. I want to bring more green into this because I feel like the red pink with the gray, I just wasn't loving. And now I'm going back in with that shimmery pink shade. Okay, so I adjusted the lid shade and I'm just not feeling the pink on the outer corner here. So I'm just going to wipe this off, change it up out here. I just don't like the way that was looking and I don't want to remove the whole look. Okay, so I reapplied my base and I'm going to go back into the palette and I'm just going to use that Faye shade, which is the same one I used on the inner portion. And I'm going to try to connect to where we originally applied it. Next, I'm going to take the shade Sage, and I'm just going to use this to add a little bit of green in, but also blend the edges. And then going back into Evergreen, I'm going to use this just to add depth on this outer corner. And then I think I'm going to try this shade called Jazzy. This is a metallic, so I don't know how this is going to work. But I'm just going to keep this low. I never really do like metallics on the outer portion of my lid, but I feel like I wanted more depth. So I went ahead and put the rest of my makeup on. I am struggling with allergies right now. I feel like I'm stuffed up again. So if you hear that, I don't know what's going on with that. I also decided to do a wing on one side and then no wing on the other. Even though it doesn't look cohesive, I did want to show you kind of the difference and different kind of looks you can get. Also, my brows recently, I've been struggling with them like more so than ever and I don't know why. I just feel like they're either too close, too far, too low, too high. So let's just not discuss those. I want to finish the lower lash line. So I'm going to start with this eye and I am going to go in first to the deepest matte shade called Evergreen. And I'm going to use this on a flat brush. I'm just going to connect with this outer portion and just smoke in. And then underneath that, I'm going to take Sage and I am going to mix in just a little bit of it, of Evergreen, just to make sure that I keep that depth. And I'm not sure if I'm going to like this, but I do want to try to take a little bit of Holly. This is the matte light pink. So this is very subtle, but I just wanted to bring some of that pink into this look. Okay, and then for this side, I'm gonna go in with my favorite, the Nabla liner in black. I'm gonna take this all the way across. And then I'm gonna take a flat brush and just smoke it out. Okay, so I hope this isn't a bad idea, but I'm gonna go into the pink. I just really want to tie in the pink. Next, I'm going to go into that Jazzy shade, which is a metallic. So I'm definitely getting fallout with this, but again, I'm blending a metallic shade, so pretty easy to just wipe away. And to tie it in, I am going to take some Sage mixed with Evergreen. And then I'm going to grab the shimmery pink shade called Flare. And I have my brush wet. And then on the inner corner, I'm going to try the shade Flutter. This one's pretty chunky. So I just wet my brush. And I am going to take some of this Marlin shade and just sandwich it in between. Okay guys, so here are the two looks I came up with using the new Natasha Denona palette. I can't tell which one I like more. I'm a little thrown off because they're so different. Let me know down below which look you prefer. I feel like I have an idea of what most of you will like better, but I am still curious. So my thoughts on the palette is I absolutely love the packaging. It's probably my favorite she's ever done. I'm a huge fan of the midi palettes. I just like having 15 shades, but the price point is not as painful as, you know, like over 100. That's when I really start like, whoo, like the Pat McGrath or the big Natasha Denona palettes. I just feel like the midi is that sweet spot. I didn't originally really like this color story. It didn't draw me in. I wasn't really interested. And then when I started seeing swatches and looks, it really changed my mind. I love a baby pink matte, and both of these are gorgeous. I also really like this shimmery shade. It looks really deep in the pan, but it's a beautiful, just like shiny metallic pink on the lid. These green tones are beautiful. And then even these two mattes, just very cool toned, unique, almost like pastel vibes. I love this color story. I think it's really unique to my collection, but somehow it's still wearable. Now, of course, I went full Mimi on this side, and then I went really dark over here. I do like to push myself to try to use a lot of colors, build up depth, you know, use the metallics, but most days I would really reach into either like the pink or this shade up here, maybe pop one of these shimmers on the inner corner, and I'm good to go. I would have liked to see one of these shimmery shades be a matte. So you saw me use this really deep shimmery like brown shade to add some depth, because really the deepest matte you have is going to be evergreen, which is like that cream to powder. But when I wanted just a little bit more depth, I did go in with this shimmer, and it did work out beautifully. So I would have liked to see this shade just be a matte shade. I experienced zero issues blending. Everything was pigmented. Actually, really surprisingly, these pastel type of mattes really pack a punch. I feel like if you want them to punch even more, use like a white base on your lid. The standout shades in this palette for me have to be the Evergreen, which is that creamy matte. Also Marlin, this gorgeous green, like mint green shimmer. I also really love the pink shimmer, just absolutely stunning. And then I would say this pink and this green. So I feel like they really ground the palette, and then you can kind of play with the other colors to add pizzazz. The only two shades that I feel like are a little bit finicky would be these two shades right here. They're more of like a topper, so I don't want to say finicky, but they have more fallout. They're a little bit more flaky. I would use a wet brush or a glitter glue, something like that. I did have fallout, especially with the metallics, because I was using metallics with a fluffy brush. So I was blending back and forth, and I was expecting that. So that's, you know, nothing that surprises me. But overall, I really love this palette. I love the vibe of it. I love the color story, the packaging. I would have thought this would have been maybe a palette that would have come out in the springtime, but nonetheless, I think it is gorgeous. You guys will have to let me know down below. I'm gonna continue to play around with it and see what other looks I can come up with, but I think she knocked it out of the park with this. I think it's a gorgeous, gorgeous release, and I like that it's not, you know, the normal like romantic berries and, you know, pinks that we get from her. I love that she added in like those mod green type colors. So let me know what you guys think about this palette down below. Did you pick it up? Are you going to pick it up? And also, what do you think about the looks that I created? I would love to hear your feedback. I will link the palette down below, as well as everything else that I'm wearing right now. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, I hope you stick around and subscribe. As always, thank you guys again so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.